introduction. As ma'am has already told you that meeting is going to be recorded, and also if you guys have any sort of question during the session or in between as well, you can write that down in the chat box. We'll take it up at the end of the session or during session if you feel if it's necessary. Also, you can raise your hands if you want to. There's an option you all can see in your name. There's an option to raise your hand. You can raise your hand as well, and we'll let you unmute yourself and we'll let you ask that question. So a very warm welcome and good morning to all of you. I hope, and obviously I'm seeing that all of you are very much enthusiastic about today's session. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for joining us on today's session of our 2 days workshop on domestic violence draft complaining. And I am Ritika. I am a second year law student like most of you, and I am from Mary College, and I am also a December intern at Law Chakra by Sanya. And I'm super excited for this session. I'm super excited. I'll tell you why. Because few days back, I hope कि आप सबने movie थप्पड़ के बारे में सुना होगा. I watched that movie, and you must have also heard about the most talked about survey, National Family Health Survey. So one of the data in that survey was a shocking 44.4% of women were facing spousal and domestic violence. So when we see as a legal student and as a citizen in general as well, that there is so much rise in this data, it becomes important for us to understand कि ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है, and अगर हो रहा है तो we as a legal professional what we can do. So if law is an art, we are the artists. It's our duty to understand how to implement the art efficiently and effectively so that it goes in the mind of the judge who is there, or we draft our complaint nicely. So this is very important that we know our art nicely, and for this purpose only we have organized this session, and I'm super excited like all of you, and we hope that today's session will definitely give you some learning and teaching as to how to proceed in that direction correctly. So first of all, let's talk about Law Chakra by Sanya, who is organizing this workshop. It is a teaching firm, and it aims to train and bring together budding legal professionals. It strives to serve and create a society, and it trains young legal minds like you and me to become competent and confident legal professionals. Also, this is the very first workshop of Law Chakra by Sanya, and initially, as ma'am already told you, we were only allowing 50 participants, but we got an overwhelming response, and then we decided to take everybody and allow everybody to join this workshop. So ma'am will be telling you about all the details about the domestic violence, what the law is like, how to draft effectively, how to apply the facts to the law to the facts. So ma'am will be telling you all and educating you all about that. And talking about Sanya ma'am, she is the founder of Law Chakra by Sanya. She's an amazing and super confident woman. She teaches young students like you and me in about the legal field, about how to be confident, about the nitty-gritties of the laws. So she'll be telling you all about domestic violence, drafting, how to read the problem statement, and I'll I'll now ask ma'am to continue the session from here on. And if you guys have any kind of question during the session, you can write that down in the chat box. Feel free to communicate. This is a platform. You will not be judged. You will not be, you should not be worried about any kind of image of yourself. Just feel free to write any kind of questions if you have any in your mind in the chat box. I hand it over to Sanya ma'am. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much, Gitika. Guys, I'm sure you were not able to tell this is Gitika's first time hosting, and I'm so proud of her. This is amazing the way she's welcomed you all, And I am so glad to see so many of you join us. I mean, we all know that, we register and then we don't show up because we don't really, know if we'll be available then or not. And still, so many of you are here on a Saturday morning. I got a lot of messages saying that there are people who have their classes and people who have to go to court also, so they won't be able to join us. So, for the benefit of everybody, we are actually recording this session, and we are making sure that after today's session we are uploading the video on our YouTube channel. You can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, LinkedIn by Law Chakra. The handle is Law Chakra by Sanya. We'll share the links with you all towards the end of today's session. Now, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Gitika. I just want you to know that, I mean, I know a lot of you, I've seen you before in other sessions, so you know who I am, and I won't waste time on that. But yeah, one thing what I wanted to tell you was why we decided to do a workshop on drafting domestic violence complaints. So I don't know if you were there or you attended the bail drafting workshop that we did earlier with Advocate Ashima. We did that to make sure that all of us as lawyers or lawyers to be, we understand our duty to serve the society to the best of our ability, period. So how do we do that? Is by knowing the law that especially is enacted and enforced to protect the weaker sections of our society, which entails women, especially children, poor people. And no matter where we go, what we do, I would recommend this, I would suggest this, I would urge you to do this, that wherever you reach in life, always have that corner of your heart that says that no, I also need to give back. I need to either help out somebody else who doesn't have any backing, who doesn't really know how things are done, and I am in this field. Especially if you're a first generation lawyer, you'll know the pains of it. So make sure that nobody else has to go through what you've had to go through. If you can take out some time, and this is the best way to actually spend your time as a law student also, you join a legal aid cell, you join an NGO, you join anywhere around you, any organization that's working for the betterment of the society and that you truly believe in, you join them. You try to understand and develop legal skills by helping them. It won't just be about you learning and picking up new things, it will also be about you making a difference. So I would urge, and the fact that you all are here, I know that you already have that in you. You want to be able to do that, to be able to help people, and drafting plays a very, very important role in your ability to do that. Like Gitika just told you, it's a very sad situation in our country, in the world also for that matter, but in our country it's worse, and especially after lockdown it's gotten from bad to worse. The domestic violence cases are rising like anything, and of course there is this rumor, not rumor per se, but then there are all kinds of people, there are all kinds of cases, there are all kinds of false accusations also, false cases also, that are out of spite, out of just ego clash. But you can't really say that there's no need for this law because this law is being abused so much. There's so many laws like that. But in case of women, it has been said repeatedly, and I've had so many debates with so many of my male colleagues that women have so much protection from the government. They have so many laws that are protecting them, and they go and abuse them, and then they ask for feminism or equality or things like that. Why do we need these laws? There's a reason why these laws were enacted. There's a reason why these laws are specifically for women, and there's a reason why we still need them, and they're still not being implemented to the full capacity. And yes, we can go on talking about how many amendments there should be in the law, how it should be gender neutral, this, that. But within the existing law, in my personal experience and in my professional experience, I've seen so many lawyers who don't really care just exactly what they are writing in their draft that is going to be filed in front of the judge. And based on that draft, based on your application, your complaint, your petition, the judge will decide whether there's any merit in the case or not. So your first hurdle comes, your first introduction to the judge, even before you've appeared in front of the judge, is the draft that you file. And if that is poorly drafted, or if that does not really show the judge that yes, there was a cause of action, there was a reason why this case was filed, and there is merit in this, so we should go ahead with this. We should call the opposite party. We should let them argue their case before us. We should listen to them and then make a reasoned judgment on it. So until and unless you make judge feel that your draft is strong enough to be able to move ahead with the case, your case will be dismissed in limine. And in limine, it means before you even got a chance to appear and say that, okay, no, these are the facts and this is why I'm appearing and this is why I'm doing this. That there are a lot of reasons for that. First of all, there is backlog. The judges don't have the time for frivolous applications and complaints. Secondly, there is this, majority opinion that a lot of the domestic violence cases or the 498A of IPC, the cruelty cases, or the cases where women are saying that उनके साथ sexual harassment हुआ है या उनके साथ किसी तरह का discrimination हुआ है, वो cases are just false, with some ulterior motive. They look at the financial standing of the woman, they look at the poorly drafted application of the complaint, and they'll be like, no, we don't need to entertain this. So that is one reason why your draft has to be very, very powerful. Second reason is that if you have a client that is actually suffering, that client would need immediate relief. And the provision for granting immediate relief is also under the Domestic Violence Act. Before I officially begin with today's topic and start the presentation, I would like to hear from all of you. How many of you actually sat down to study the sections that were mentioned in your welcome mail, in the welcome message? Section 12, Section 18, 19, 20, 21, 22 of Domestic Violence Act. How many of you actually studied those provisions? Problem statement पे तो मैं बाद में आऊंगी. पहले आप ये बताओ मुझे. Did you go through, or at least just cruise through, or just gave a bare reading to these provisions? Sarah did. Great. Great. Wow. So many people did. Asta did. Awesome. Yashta did. Parnika did. I am so glad that you did. So glad that you did. Because you'll actually find out later in the session today why it is important for you to familiarize yourself with the law. Even if you don't understand all of it, even if you can't make sense of all the words that are there, especially if we have a 12th standard student with us today, I'm sure that it will be way beyond the scope of what you are used to. But still, just trying to go through it, just trying to understand it is enough. And I'll tell you why later in the session today. So yes, there are provisions of immediate relief in Domestic Violence Act, and that is the reason why the act was enacted in the first place. And we will go into the details of that also. But that is why you have to be all the more careful to show through your draft just exactly why your client deserves those immediate reliefs. And if they would want those immediate reliefs, your client, the urgency has to be shown in your draft. And if you're able to show that in a very strong manner, in a very strong language, and when the notice goes to the opposite party, notice means the court summons, once the case is filed, the opposite party will be notified that yes, this case has been filed against you. You are supposed to appear on this and this day and come and present your case. What is your defense to that? So when the notice goes and the copy of your petition or your draft or your complaint or your application goes to the opposite party, it should be so strong that the opposite party, just by reading your draft, will know that they have no case. it'll be very long and very hard for them to prove that they did not do all of that, and they would then cease to commit the acts of domestic violence, and they would eventually agree to settle outside the court. That is what we are trying to do, because we all know how legal battles can be, how emotionally, financially they are taxing, especially for a woman who's already been through so much. So we want to get her the relief, right? If our draft is so strong, then all the reliefs that we have prayed for in our draft can be achieved in an out of court settlement. Once the opposite party and their lawyer also know that there is no chance for them to win this. That is also another reason why your draft is so important. Now we will begin with the presentation. And I would urge all of you, like Gitika said, and there are some people who joined us just now. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat box. Gitika will be collecting your questions. We will be answering the relevant questions towards the end of the session. If there's something absolutely urgent that you need to say right then, right there, you can't hold your peace whatsoever, then please raise your hand and Gitika will decide if, she can unmute you at that point. She'll ask me, and, if we can stop there for a while, we will. But if it will derail the flow of the session, then we will hold on till the end of the session. Okay. Because we also have a lot of ground to cover and a lot of instructions to give you. You have a very, very long day ahead. You have a very important task to complete before tomorrow, which is the second day of the workshop. So yes, do not worry. I understand that when you're studying this, when you're reading this for the first time, and sadly, domestic violence is not a subject we are taught in law schools. It's not something that we are specifically asked to study. So the fact that you're here and you're trying to learn about it is amazing. And since you're doing it for the first time, you will take multiple readings to understand it thoroughly. But I'll give you the basics today. I'll help you understand the flow of the law so you're able to make sense of it when you're trying to draft. Okay, so I'll start sharing my screen now. Kitika, please let me know if it's visible.
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Okay, great. So this is our topic for the workshop, drafting domestic violence complaints. And today is day one. Okay, what is our agenda for today? The things that we are going to discuss are these three things broadly. First, we'll understand the basics of Domestic Violence Act, what the law really says. Then we'll talk about the ingredients that must be present in your draft. Now, I've written this in the welcome mail also, and I've emphasized this a lot of times, and I'll say this again today, that we're not here to spoon feed you. There is no one right way to draft. Okay, there never is. But yes, there's a structure that we follow, and how we use that structure, how strategic we are, what our understanding of the law and the facts is, will depend on us. So it comes with practice. All of you are law students, or somebody who's trying to get into a law school. So it is a very good place to start learning about this and to hone your skill. So once you are able to understand these ingredients, you will need a lot of practice. So it is not like today you'll know the ingredients and tomorrow you can draft like a pro. No, we always say this, we are practicing lawyers. Even if it's been almost 4 years for me in the practice of law, I am not a master of anything. I am never going to be. Even if it's been 20 years, 50 years for some really, really great legal minds of our country or the judges, they will never be the master of law, because the law is evolving on a daily basis. We have to learn, unlearn, relearn so many things. So we can never master anything. We can only practice. And that's why it's called practice. Okay. And then we'll discuss the problem statement that I had given all of you. And I'm sure you must have taken a look at that too if you've, looked at the important provisions that I asked you to. So what is the law on domestic violence? We know that we have an act, that is Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act. that was enacted in 2005. And it was within that act that you found those sections that you read. Now, there was somebody who said that, I've read all the sections till section 23 of the act, which is a great thing to do. Another thing I want you to keep in mind, even though I asked you to read section 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and section 12 also, you wouldn't really know what those words mean or what those provisions mean if you don't connect those provisions with the definitions clause that came before. Section 2 of every Bear Act, majority of Bear Acts are where your laws are. Okay. So Bear Act is the law. If you want to understand if there's a law on a particular topic, you just pick up the Bear Act that has been enacted by the parliament. That is the law. The judgments that come, the commentaries that there are, the guides there are, the things that we do in classrooms, the things that we do in courtrooms where we are just arguing and discussing a point of law, it is all coming from the Bear Act. So it's very important for you to understand the Bear Act. And you should always understand the Bear Act right from the first page, which tells you the objective of the act, which tells you the preamble, which tells you where all the act is applicable, which also again, and as you move forward, it will tell you the important definitions, and then it will begin with stating the law or who has what duty under the law and things like that. In this particular act, you had section 2, which talks about important definitions. Some definitions I'm going to discuss with you today. We need to know who can file the case. We need to know against whom the case can be filed. We also need to know where the case has to be filed. Okay. So these are the very few things that we need to know before we even think about drafting. And yes, we need to know what is the legal definition of domestic violence. Can anybody tell me in the chat box, where is the legal definition of domestic violence given in the Bear Act? I mean, yes, of course, you can Google it, but if you've gone through it, or if you have an idea, or even if you just want to take a wild guess, you can just write in the chat box. And yes, guys, please don't worry about seeming stupid or wrong or anything. We are all constantly learning. This is a safe space, and the more we interact with each other, the more knowledge we'll gain from each other. And we have very limited time together, so don't worry about being stupid. Okay, everybody is stupid. Nobody is a master here. And okay, Shashank, Ritik, Bikram, Shivam, Nidhi, Shreya, everybody is saying section 3. So Shreya is also saying section 2. Anshita is saying section 2. Okay. So awesome, guys. Now in this particular act, although we have important definitions in section 2, so section 2 defines who will be the aggrieved person, who can file the case, who is the respondent, who is a protection officer, who is a service provider, and those major important definitions are there. But section 3 defines what is domestic violence. Okay, so before that, we need to understand why this law was enacted in the first place. And that reason is given in the object of your Bear Act, the preamble of your Bear Act. This act was enacted to protect women. That is in the title of the act, right? So India, if you go through the history later, and I'll keep it very brief, just to give you a background, that there was a Vienna conference in 1993, and there was a Beijing Declaration in 1995, which talked about violence against women, and which talked about women's rights being human rights, being recognized as human rights, and the fact that they deserve to be protected. And the countries that are signatories to those conventions, those conferences, they have a moral duty, they have an ethical duty, they have a duty to enact laws that protect women. And India ratified to United Nations Convention on Elimination of all forms of discrimination against women. We call this CEDAW. Okay, you can read up more about it. I'll write in the chat box. CEDAW. So India ratified to CEDAW in 1993, which means ratified means that yeah, India agreed with whatever CEDAW stood for. And then before that, with Vienna Declaration, with Beijing Declaration, and there were other conventions of United Nations where India, stood up for protection of women. And that's why in 1983, India legalized, actually penalized, not legalized. India penalized cruelty against women. So Section 498A of IPC, which is, so all these sections go hand in hand, is also something that you'll understand once you start studying more, once you observe practical goings on. So I'll write in the chat box for your convenience. Section 498A IPC was enacted. It's so whenever there's an a capital A in front of any section, you know it's an amendment. Okay, amendment means it has been inserted after the original act came into existence. So 498A came in 1983, which aimed at protecting women in their matrimonial homes from their husbands' relatives who were trying to commit cruelty against them, or harassing them, or violating their rights in any manner whatsoever. So the fact that it is penalized, it means that it is recognized as an actual offense under the Indian Penal Code, and there's a punishment that goes along with it, and it can be criminally tried. And after that, a long time after that, in 2005, the law on domestic violence was enacted in our country, again to protect women. Now you have to understand, for times immemorial, we all know we live in a patriarchal world. We all know that. And yes, we say that feminism, what is feminism? What are feminists? They're trying to divide the society. They're trying to divide the homes. They're trying to break the homes and things like that. That's very narrow understanding of what feminism stands for. At the end of the day, it's all about equality of men and women, not being recognized or demeaned or given advantages or disadvantages based on your gender. There should be no discrimination whatsoever based on your gender. That's what feminism stands for. And for times immemorial, it has been very easy for the society to, shut up a woman, to throw a woman behind the closed doors of her family, of her home, and then do anything with her as they please and call it a private family matter. And we all know that, and it is not just in India, it's the world, and sadly that is the reality. And women have been seen as the property of men for the longest time. And yes, there are changes, we are trying to evolve, and our generation is a lot better, but there's still a long way to go. And that's why these laws are important, because they try to protect women just in that area where they are most vulnerable. So domestic violence, when this act was enacted, when this law was enacted, it talked about domestic violence not just being the physical beatings, the physical violence against the woman. It included sexual violence. It included verbal and emotional abuse for the first time. It included economic abuse for the first time, which was not present in the law before. Even Section 498A of IPC only considered the physical and even mental cruelty to some extent against the woman, against the wife by husband or husband's relatives. But Domestic Violence Act for the first time recognized that emotional abuse, verbal abuse, economic abuse is also domestic violence, and not just actual conduct of it or actual action against a woman, but even the threat of it is punishable. Okay. And another reason why the law was enacted was to grant immediate reliefs to a woman. Now, this law is it's not completely civil, it's not completely criminal, it's somewhere in the middle of it. There are some orders that can be passed by the judge, which is the magistrate, and code of criminal procedure is followed when it comes to punishing the defaulter. But code of civil procedure code is followed when it comes to serving the notice, or how the case will proceed and what will happen. And the accused person is not considered a criminal per se. Okay, we call the accused person a respondent. The nomenclature also becomes very important. When you are filing a domestic violence complaint or an application, you are either complainant or an applicant. It depends. You can call yourself a complainant, you can call yourself an applicant also. And if you are being served with the notice for a domestic violence case, then you will be called a respondent and not an accused. In criminal cases, we have accused. So there are some measures that the magistrate is allowed to take under this act, and we will understand what those orders are. And if one of those orders is breached, only then the magistrate can say, okay, this person will be imprisoned for such and such time. But other than that, the magistrate can pass those orders and make sure that the accused, the respondent, follows those orders. And it is not strictly criminal in nature, but it tries to expedite the entire process to make sure that there is relief, and the relief is granted on an urgent basis. Now, what is a legal definition? We've just discussed legal definition includes physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional and verbal abuse, economic abuse. We'll elaborate on that in the coming slides. Who can file the case against whom? Now, the complainant has to be a woman. As per section 2R, I think, no, 2A. 2A defines aggrieved person. We will talk about that also in the following slides. So who can be an aggrieved person? An aggrieved person can be a woman who is in a matrimonial relationship, or in a family relationship, or in conjugal relationship, or just living in a house in a domestic setting, in a domestic relationship. We'll understand that also. So that woman is an aggrieved person if the acts of domestic violence are committed against her. And against whom the case can be filed? The case can be filed against the male partner or the male family member, along with other female family members as well, who are aiding and abetting the main person in committing acts of domestic violence. We'll understand that also in the following slides. Now, where and when can the case be filed? The case has to be filed within the territorial jurisdiction. Now, territorial jurisdiction again is a technical term. It means the territory within which the magistrate has the authority to entertain a case. So, for example, if the incident has occurred in Gurgaon, then the magistrate of Gurgaon, the JMIC, which is Judicial Magistrate First Class of Gurgaon District Courts, will have territorial jurisdiction over this particular case. Now, there are 3 ways to make jurisdiction, and this is very important. Listen to this very carefully. You have to have a separate paragraph of jurisdiction in your draft to show the court that yes, the court has jurisdiction. If that is not there, then your case can be rejected before the first hearing comes. And if the case does not get rejected, the opposite party will raise an objection, and there'll be arguments, and it'll protract the litigation. So yeah, pay attention to the jurisdiction. Now, section 27 of the act talks about jurisdiction. There are 3 ways a jurisdiction can be created in this particular law. The first is if within the territorial jurisdiction of the place where the respondent resides or works. Okay, respondent is the person against whom the case has been filed. So if they live somewhere or if they work somewhere, then उसके आसपास का जो district court है वहां पे jurisdiction होगी. अगर और there is or, okay, it is not mandatory कि वहीं पे आपको case file करना है. और जहां पे cause of action हुआ है, cause of action क्या है? Cause of action is the reason why you're filing the complaint in the first place. So where the domestic violence has occurred. So if I am living with my husband in Gurgaon or in Delhi, if I'm living in Delhi, and then I come back to Gurgaon, and I was living with him in Delhi and domestic violence happened in Delhi, then I have an option to file the case either in Delhi or in Gurgaon. Why? Because there's another clause in section 27 that says that you can file the case in the court of magistrate within whose jurisdiction you as a woman, a grieved person, are temporarily residing or permanently residing or temporarily working also. So जहां पे मैं इस टाइम पर हूँ, अगर मुझे एक डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस का केस फाइल करना है, for example, something happened with my husband or with my matrimonial home, I left that place, I came to some other city altogether, जहाँ पे मैं काम कर रही हूँ या मैं अपने रिलेटिव के पास रह रही हूँ, टेम्पररीली भी रह रही हूँ, किसी भी रीजन की वजह से मैं वहां पे भी केस फाइल कर सकती हूँ. Okay, so that's also how the laws are tilting in favor of women, making sure that the woman does not have to suffer more just when it comes to filing the case and the complaint also. So where can the case be filed? Within the territorial jurisdiction. I just gave you the 3 options that you have to create jurisdiction, and that has to be mentioned in your draft. When the case can be filed, there is no limitation to file a domestic violence case. Although we do recommend the sooner the better, because a lot of times it happens that the opposite party raises an objection saying that इतने साल हो गए अभी तक तो कुछ बोला नहीं, तो अब क्यों? एंड देन उस पे आपका जो एविडेंस है, जो आपके पास प्रूफ है, जो आप बता सकते हो कि हाँ ये हुआ था, ज्यादा टाइम के बाद आपके पास वो प्रूफ भी खत्म हो जाता है. So that's why we say that if something has happened, एक तो nobody is ever going to, don't think that you are a superhero or you are somebody who would be a social worker to change somebody's mentality or somebody's behavior. You are not there to change or reform anybody else. If it has happened once, it can happen again. Don't tolerate just for the sake of tolerating, just for the sake of, just in the hopes of saving your marriage or saving your home or this and that, whatever reason. If you are living with an abuser, the abuser will always be an abuser. So the sooner you get out of it, the better. And why do you need to know this? I just told you. You need to know all of these important factors, all of these important definitions, all of these important provisions of the law in order to draft your complaint. If you don't know the law, you won't be able to apply the law to the facts. So it's not just the facts that you need to know. And remember, when the client will be coming to you or to your senior, or when you'll be understanding the facts for the first time, the client doesn't know the law. The client won't be able to tell कि हाँ मेरे साथ ये हुआ है इसका मतलब इकोनॉमिक अब्यूज हुआ है, या मेरे साथ ये हुआ है इसका मतलब फिजिकल अब्यूज हुआ है. नो, आपको वो फैक्ट सुनने हैं, आपको वो समझने हैं, आपको फिर डिसाइड करना है कि ये फिजिकल अब्यूज है, ये सेक्सुअल अब्यूज है, मेंटल अब्यूज है, इमोशनल अब्यूज है, इकोनॉमिक अब्यूज है, कैसा अब्यूज है ये, और आपको जज को कन्विंस करना है that ऐसा ऐसा हुआ है, which means under this section this has been done and that is why I'm asking for this relief, to put it very, very simply. Okay, so you need to know the law and you need to know the jurisdiction, you need to know the cause of action, you need to know the technical terms before you even think of drafting. Okay, now moving on. One second. I don't know how this line has appeared on my screen, Gitika. I don't know what is this. Okay. One second. Okay. Now I know. Okay. Trying to remove that line. Okay, I can't do it. Never mind. So section 3, we just discussed what section 3 is. It broadly tells you what is domestic violence under the law, what is the legal definition under the law. These are the terms that you must be very, very mindful of. So if any act or omission, act means actively doing something, omission means refraining from doing something. So if for example, something is happening, if let's say I'm being beat up by my mother-in-law and my husband is just standing there not doing anything, his silence means he is agreeing with her, he is accepting it, he is aiding and abetting domestic violence. So his action of not taking action is also domestic violence. Okay. So act or omission to do something that harms or injures or endangers or threatens the health, the safety, the wealth, the life of the woman. That includes physical, verbal, emotional, sexual, and economic abuse. Now, I'm repeating these terms again and again. Let's just understand what they are broadly. And of course, you need to study the law to go deep inside. Physical abuse, we all know, hitting somebody when there's a mark, when there is a physical fight, or where there is throwing somebody, or raising, let's say I'm raising my hand but I'm not hitting you. That is also physical abuse. That counts as assault. Okay. So if I am picking up something to throw at you, or if I am making you feel like your body is in danger for some reason, your safety is in danger, then that is physical violence. If I am constantly taunting somebody, if I'm constantly calling names, if I'm abusing them, if I am saying that, तुम्हें तो कुछ भी नहीं आता, तुम तो कुछ नहीं कर सकते, तुम किसी चीज के लायक नहीं हो, तुम मेरे को ये चीज स्पेसिफिकली मेंशन की है एक्ट में भी, that especially for not bearing a male child, if the woman is called names, if the woman is abused again and again or taunted by the family members, that is verbal and emotional abuse. Not being sensitive to what the woman needs, how she's feeling, or not letting her go out of the house, not letting her talk to her family and friends, all of that is verbal and emotional abuse. Sexual abuse, now you have to understand there's one spectrum and there are two different ends of spectrum. One end says when you are forcing yourself upon somebody, when you are engaging in unnatural sexual activities that are without the consent of the woman, that constitutes as sexual abuse. And on the other hand, if you are not engaging in any sexual activity whatsoever with your wife, as a husband, without any reason, without any conversation, communication, and there is that gap, that is also sexual abuse. Then let's come to economic abuse. Economic abuse is a very important addition. So if a woman is not allowed to work, if a woman is not allowed to take up employment, or if for every single penny she's in a situation that has been orchestrated in such a manner that the woman will have to rely on the husband or the husband's family members for her daily needs. घर का खर्च कैसे चलेगा, वो कितना बजट है, क्या है, वो सब या आपका हस्बैंड देगा, या आपके फादर इन लॉ देंगे, या आपकी फैमिली में कोई और देगा. आप यू आर नॉट अलाउड टू हैव एनी मनी on your own, of your own. You're not allowed to work, you're not allowed to earn, you're not allowed to, or even if you are earning, if you have a salary, all of your salary has to go to your husband or any other member in the family if you're living in a joint family. So that is also economic abuse. Okay. So not letting a woman be financially independent is economic abuse. Now, section 2A defines aggrieved person. Sorry, there's a typo here. The aggrieved spelling should be different. It should be AGGRIEVED. So aggrieved person is any woman who lives or lived in a shared household with the respondent. Okay. So I saw a question, and recently there has been a judgment, that not a judgment, an order by a Jammu Kashmir court, that even men can file complaints against the complaint of domestic violence against the wife. The order accepted that complaint, Jammu Kashmir, but I personally, if you ask me, if you ask my experience and my understanding of the law, then a man cannot be permitted as per the law to file a domestic violence complaint against the wife. Why? Because this section particularly defines a aggrieved person as any woman who lives or lived in a shared household with the respondent. We'll understand what is a shared household. We'll need to understand who is a respondent. But aggrieved person is a woman. Okay. So it can be any woman living in the house, but it cannot be a husband as per the law that we have as of now. So Sejal has also asked, ma'am, in case of economic abuse, it also covers dowry. Yes, it does cover dowry. It does cover, forcing a woman to get money from her um, parental home, or to get a share of the property in her parental home, or to ask for her brother to give her some money, which has to go to the husband. Yes, absolutely. Dowry is economic abuse. So Akshat says, why is it so that it is not distinctly a criminal matter? So that is because criminal trials also take a very long time, and the very intention of this act is to expedite and to give some immediate relief to the one second, immediate relief to one second. Why am I not able to? Okay, yes. So some immediate relief has to be given to the woman, right? The agenda, the act, the objective of this act, and if you read it thoroughly, is to protect the woman from domestic violence, right? So if you go into the criminal trial, the accused person will again go for bail, and there'll be other ways for that person to harass. And ultimately, the goal of this act is not to do that. There are plenty of provisions in the Indian Penal Code for that, and that is why a lot of the times the complaint under section 498A of IPC go hand in hand with the complaint under section 12 of the Domestic Violence Act. It's an additional remedy. It's not the only remedy, and it can go this case, and this particular provision, the application under section 12 can go hand in hand with any other case that's also pending against the accused or the abuser. Okay. So, Sarah, your question will be answered in the following slide. Live-in relationship is legal now, so does the law apply there too? And Yashta said, can we correlate concepts of marital rape and sexual abuse in DV Act? In fact, Prerna, who's also one of our interns, has asked the same question yesterday, and we will discuss that. It's a very important question, and thank you for bringing it to my notice. Very, very important question, Yashta. But before we do that, let's understand the basics of the act. Okay, let's understand the basic definitions that we need to know to understand this exactly how the law has to be enforced. So section 2F of domestic, it defines domestic relationship. We understood that a aggrieved person is any woman that's living in a domestic relationship in a shared household with the respondent. So we have to understand what is domestic relationship, who is a respondent, what is a shared household. Okay. So here, as you can see, if the aggrieved person has at any point of time lived together or is living in a shared household, uh, when they are related through a relationship in the nature of marriage, adoption, or are family members living together as a joint family. So domestic relationship here includes a sister, a mother, domestic help, anybody that is living in a joint family, you know, in a shared household, related by consanguinity. Consanguinity is when you have the same ancestors. So you are either cousins or anything like that, or marriage, or through a relationship in the nature of marriage. When you talk about relationship in the nature of marriage, that includes live-in relationships. And there have been plenty of judgments of the Supreme Court, also different high courts also, that talk about how women are protected even in domestic, in live-in relationships. They are protected against domestic violence. So the act applies to live-in relationships also, adoption, or our family members living together. So even if you're living together as family members, so when we talk about women domestic helps, they are also entitled to protection against domestic violence, even though they are not directly related, but if they are living with the family, living together as a joint family, then they are entitled to be protected against domestic violence. So it is not just the wife that can seek protection under this act. It includes all the female members, including the mother, the daughter, the sister. And yes, the complaint can be filed against the respondent. And who is the respondent? Any adult male who lives or has lived in a shared household with the respondent is the respondent will be the respondent. Again, there's a typo, I guess, including the relatives. Okay. So to understand this better, there was this judgment. Hiral Hirosa, something like that. I am not Hiral Harosa judgment by Supreme Court, which was very famous. Actually, it struck down the words adult male from this particular section. Section 2Q from the definition of respondent, saying that there is no intelligible differentia. There is no reason for the classification between males and females, adults and non-adults here. When you understand the objective of the act, you know it's to protect women from domestic violence. So domestic violence can be committed by anybody. It can also be committed by a female family member. So it can also be committed by a minor who's in the house, who's just helping, their relatives or their grandfather, grandmother, or their parents to commit, domestic violence against somebody. So the term adult male doesn't have to be here. So they deleted the term, but there has been no amendment to the law. So as per the law, adult male is still there in this particular definition. And when I was telling you about that Jammu Kashmir order recently that came that said that husbands can also file domestic violence complaints against their wife, they cited this judgment only, and they cited the definition of the respondent, saying that if the respondent can be anybody, doesn't have to be just a adult male member, then why do we say that okay, husbands can't file the complaint? My argument to that is that because a husband can't be a aggrieved person under the act. Okay, the act says any woman, and that has not been deleted or modified or amended. Okay, so okay, I know. Yes, Hiral Harsora. Yes, this Hiralal Harsora. This was the judgment. Rishabh has posted this in the chat box. Thank you, Rishabh. So you guys can just take a look at that judgment. That was also very important. Now we understand what is shared household, where they have to live together or they have lived together. Now remember, it can have happened in the past. Okay, it's not necessary that they are still living together. So where the person aggrieved lives or at any stage has lived in a domestic relationship, either singly, so there are times when the wife is living alone with her in-laws and the husband is not there, or along with the respondent, and includes such a household, whether owned or tenanted either jointly by the aggrieved person and the respondent, or owned or tenanted by either of them. So, here you have to understand that the title of the husband is not important. It is not important that you have to own the place where you are staying. You can be a tenant. You can be living in a joint family household. You can be, in the idea is that you should be in a domestic setup. You should be in a relationship, a marital relationship or a family relationship, and you should be living together in a shared household where you are in a domestic relationship with each other. So the title of the place does not matter whether the husband owns the place or not. There was a very problematic judgment on this, which is S.R. Batra. I think, again, it was a Supreme Court judgment, which said that if, the house is owned by the mother-in-law, then the wife has no rights in that house, and cannot say that domestic violence occurred in that house when they didn't live in that house whatsoever, and the house belongs to the mother-in-law and not the husband. So this was a very problematic judgment, and a lot of other judgments have come up after that in different high courts, where they say that even if the house is owned by the mother-in-law, the father-in-law is not owned by the husband, it doesn't matter. The title of the house doesn't matter. If the incident of domestic violence has occurred in that house, then that house is the shared household if they are in a domestic relationship. Okay. Now, we understand the law. When we read the law, we read the act, the bare act, most of the times, right? But we often tend to overlook and forget the fact that there are also rules. So with all the legislations, there are rules. Rules specify the procedure that has to be followed. So there is one particular, a rule book of sorts, you can call it, that came into existence in 2006, that is called Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Rules 2006. This was under the Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act. And those uh, rules are very important when you're trying to understand the procedure that is to be followed, when you're trying to also understand the draft that there has to be there. Now, these are some important rules that you must go through. I'll share the link of that those rules also with you in the chat box once we are done with the presentation. Just remind me towards the end of the session. So the rule basically is Rule 5, which says DIR by PO. I know you don't know what this means. So Rule 5 says that domestic incident report has to be filed by the protection officer, which is in Form 1, and that Form 1 is given in the rules. Now, to understand this better, we will understand the procedure that happens, okay, in the next slide. Who is a protection officer? According to the Act, the state government can appoint a protection officer. They have to have certain eligibility criteria. Most of the times they are, from the women's cells in the police station. So once the protection officer is designated or appointed, once the case is filed before the magistrate, or the woman has the option, the aggrieved person has the option to either go to the nearest police station where they can talk to the protection officer. They can also go to a medical practitioner, a doctor, and they can tell the doctor. They can also go to any other service provider. Service provider, again, in the Act, you'll be able to understand they are those organizations that work for the benefit and the protection of women and children. So there are those NGOs or the shelter homes. So the woman can approach the nearest service provider, and they are also designated. They are registered as service providers by the government. And you can find the information of all of this on the NCW website. So the full form of DIR is Domestic Incident Report. Okay. So 1 second, Shivam is asking, I'll just write Domestic Incident Report is the full form of DIR, and that has to be in the format that is given in Form 1 under the Rule 5. So what happens is, once you have registered or filed a complaint or informed a service provider or a protection officer, and anyone can do that. It doesn't have to be just the aggrieved person. So if I know of somebody who is suffering from domestic violence, I can also go, and I will not be held liable for the accuracy or the correctness of the information that is provided by me. I will only provide the information that I know to the best of my knowledge, and I can't be held liable for that. So just like in Indian Penal Code, we know in CRPC, we know that anybody can file the FIR, anybody can inform the protection officer, anybody can also inform the magistrate or the service provider that this particular person is suffering from domestic violence. And then it becomes the duty of the protection officer to investigate into the matter. Okay. And when they investigate into the matter, they have to formulate a report of sorts, which is a domestic incident report. Now, if the case directly went to the protection officer first, they will form the domestic incident report and then approach the magistrate under Section 12 of the Domestic Violence Act. Or what we usually do is, when we get our clients, when we get to know what they are going through, we draft the domestic violence complaint for them, and we directly approach the magistrate under Section 12 of Domestic Violence Act. And after which the magistrate will send notice to the protection officer and ask the protection officer within whose territorial jurisdiction that incident has occurred. So the magistrate will ask the protection officer to provide them with a copy of the domestic incident report. And that has to be as per this particular form in this rule. Rule 5, Form 1. And then Rule 6 talks about application to the magistrate. So which format has to be followed? And there were some questions that I got in the forms also, that how is drafting a domestic violence complaint different from drafting anything else? It's this one major difference, that you have to follow the format which is given in form 2 and form 3 of the rule 6. So that format was also included in the sample draft that was given to you. Okay. So that form has to be there, where certain information is required by the magistrate beforehand only. Before going into the facts, you have to answer some questions in yes or no. That first of all, you have to give your details, where you're staying, when you got married, what is your name, what is your email ID, so and so. Then, are you seeking a protection order? Are you seeking a residence order? What are you seeking? What are you not seeking? Those questions have to be answered beforehand only. And then there is form 7. Form 7 is, it shows you how a court summons looks like. So when the notice has to be issued, then how the court notice looks like, you can see that in form 7. Now, before we go on to the procedure, I believe I have been talking for a long time. I will just stop sharing now and I will take up some of your questions before we go on to the procedure. Now let's see the questions that we've had till now. 1 second. So dowry, we answered. Live-in relationship, we know that yes, these cases can be filed in a live-in relationship also. Yes, this particular question I wanted to discuss with all of you. Prerna asked me this question and Yashta has asked me this question today, that why do we talk about marital rape, and what is the difference between marital rape and sexual abuse under Domestic Violence Act. Before I go on to talk about that, is there anything, any ideas that you have about this? You can just raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can talk to me, or you can write in the chat box. Anchita has also asked, for a woman or a girl under the age of 18, the POCSO law would be applicable. Yes. So Anchita, all the other laws, they go hand in hand. So just because you have a remedy under Domestic Violence Act, it doesn't mean that you can't seek remedy in other acts. So under Criminal Procedure Code Section 125, you have the right to ask for maintenance as a wife, in addition to asking for maintenance under Domestic Violence Act also. And if you're seeking for divorce, you can also ask for maintenance under Hindu Marriage Act. So you can ask for maintenance in all the acts there are, even if there is multiplicity of proceedings. But yeah, that doesn't mean that you'll get maintenance from every mean whatsoever. Whichever order comes first. The idea is to make sure that you get the order. So, okay, we have one question from Sarah. Sarah has asked, can a woman file a complaint against parents or siblings? Yes. Yes, she can. So, domestic relationship, shared household, and aggrieved person, and the definition of respondent. Keep in mind all of these things, and they are fulfilled when you talk about parents or siblings. Okay, so I believe that I'm not getting any answers right now, so I'll just quickly talk about my views on this. So when we talk about marital rape and why we want this to be an offense, we want it to be penalized, which means we want it to be under Indian Penal Code, which we want it to be recognized as an offense. You know, when we talk about rape and when we see exceptions to the rape, there is one particular proviso. I think it has been amended now from 15 years to 18 years, but it is still there that, if it's your wife and you have had sex with her without her consent, it does not come under the definition, the legal definition of the crime of rape. And that, if you ask me, is awful. It's horrible. It's pathetic, to say the least. Because a woman is a woman, whether married or not. And if she doesn't consent, she doesn't consent. And that's about it. So it should be rape, right? but it is still not recognized under the Indian Penal Code as an offense. And that is why, that is the whole debate and argument when we talk about making marital rape an offense. So it should be an offense as serious and as strict, with as strict a punishment as there is for rape under section 376 of the IPC. And when we talk about sexual abuse under Domestic Violence Act, like I told you, even though it is considered to be domestic violence, this is not a criminal remedy per se. You can seek protection. We'll understand in the following slides what are the reliefs that you can ask for, but you cannot just say that, yeah, this person has committed rape, this person is a criminal, this person should be behind bars, this person should be punished with the strictest form of punishment there is, with imprisonment, with death penalty. You can't say that. All you can do is seek protection orders and other reliefs that are under the Domestic Violence Act. Yes, marital rape has been recognized as one of the grounds for asking for divorce, for the ground of cruelty. But again, it's still not recognized as an offense, and that is where the difference lies. So, if there are any follow-up questions on that, we can discuss that towards the end of the session. So Chitra has asked, these forms will make our work easy to help them to apply to the magistrate. Is there a need to draft a complaint in addition to these forms? Yes, Suchitra, there is. And I'll tell you why. These forms are very standard forms that have to be fulfilled, that tell the magistrate that, okay, yeah, a case, a prima facie case can be made out. But you don't have the option of really persuading the judge, persuading the magistrate through those forms. And that is where your drafting skills come into play. The case will still go on. The forms only tell the judge, the magistrate, whether he wants to think that there is merit in this case or not, and there are certain criteria that has to be fulfilled. And if those things have not happened, then while filling out the form, only the aggrieved person or their lawyer or their advisor will know that, okay, you cannot make a case under domestic violence, and then you will back off on your own. So the forms are kind of a filter. But when you start drafting, when you actually talk about what has happened, and when you give brief facts and you correlate the facts with the law, that can only happen in your application, in your draft, which can be actually filed on filed by the woman or the aggrieved person on their own. Also, they can be drafted by them on their own also, but they will not be able to understand how to apply law to the facts, and that's why legal professionals are required, and that's why your efficiency is required. So I hope I've answered your questions, Ruchika. You'll also, in the following slides, you'll see a little bit more in detail why it's important. Akshat has asked regarding sexual abuse, as we learned just now, is explicitly in the DVA, but I don't believe something as serious as marital rape should be somewhere else but in CP. Exactly my point, Akshat. Because while it is recognized as domestic violence as a ground for divorce, it is still not considered an offense. That is what the debate is all about. So I'll continue with the presentation now, and you can continue posting your questions in the chat box. So we were, trying to understand the procedure. So the very first step is to file the complaint under section 12 to the judicial magistrate of first class or the metropolitan magistrate. You'll understand the difference when you start studying about it. We don't need to go into the details right now, but you need to know just exactly to which court you're addressing your complaint, so you can put it in the cause title in your draft. Okay, we'll understand that also later. So with jurisdiction, we just understood what is jurisdiction. You have to make sure there is jurisdiction. So if I am currently residing in Gurgaon and my matrimonial home was say in Hyderabad, but I'm here right now and my husband is in Hyderabad, my husband has committed domestic violence against me, I can file a case here in Gurgaon. Okay. So I will approach the JMIC of Gurgaon, the Judicial Magistrate of First Class of Gurgaon. This is just an example. You need to know all of this. This is the first step. The complaint any which way goes to the magistrate. If you go to the protection officer goes to the magistrate. If you go to the service provider, they go to the magistrate. If you directly approach the magistrate, ultimately it has to go to the magistrate. Then the first hearing happens. Ideally, the first hearing has to happen within 3 days, which is given under section 12, where the notice is to be served by the protection officer. So the protection officer will be appointed by the magistrate, and the protection officer's duty will be to serve the notice on the opposite party saying that a case has been filed against you. You have to appear for the first hearing on such and such date. And the form 7 that I told you about, you can see the form 7. So that is the format in which the court sends summons. And then within 2 days from the date of filing, ideally, the protection officer has to serve the notice upon the opposite party. And within 3 days from the date of filing, the first hearing has to take place. But sadly, in reality, it doesn't happen. The shortest date that I have managed to get recently was 3 months after the date of filing. So yeah, that is because of the backlog or whatever. But yeah, this is not strictly followed, and it should be. Then ex parte orders can also be asked for. Ex parte means in the absence of the opposite party. Say I have served the notice, I've done everything on my part, I've filed the case also. I've drafted it, I've filed it, I've gone for the first hearing, but the opposite party has not appeared. And I am in urgent need of relief. So I can ask whatever relief I've prayed for in my main complaint, and we'll talk about what reliefs you can pray for in the following slide. I can ask for those reliefs to be granted to me while the case is still pending also. So there is interim ex parte order. So if I'm saying that I need protection from this person, so even if that person is not appearing for the hearings, I can ask for protection order in that person's absence. It will be an ex parte order, and it will be an interim order. So during the case is still going on, that order will be applicable. If I have a kid and I'm worried about the safety of my kid and the opposite party is not appearing at all, then I can ask the judge, ask the magistrate to pass an order in the absence of the opposite party that gives me the custody of my child while the case is still pending, because we know that litigation takes time. So this can be done under section 23 of the Domestic Violence Act. So go through that. Then ideally, again, the magistrate has to endeavor to dispose of the case within 60 days from the first hearing. And no, it doesn't happen like that in reality. If you're not satisfied with the order, with the judgment that has been passed, you as an aggrieved person or you as a respondent, then you can go and appeal to the sessions court. Sessions court is a notch higher than the magistrate's court within 30 days from the date of receipt of the order. So it will be the magistrate's duty to ensure that you're getting a copy of the order. If you're not happy with the order, you can always ask for the appeal, and you can apply for appeal within 30 days from the date of receipt of orders. Now these are the orders that can be passed by the magistrate, and these are the orders that you can ask for in your prayer clause. So we'll talk about the structure that has to be followed in your draft, and prayer comes towards the end. So these are the things you can ask for from the magistrate while you're praying to the magistrate. Protection order. Now, if you are seeking protection in the sense that you want a restraining order of sort against the abuser, you want them to stay away from you, you want them to not call you, you want them to not approach your family members or your colleagues, you want them to not enter your place of work or where you're residing right now, you can ask for protection orders from the magistrate. Again, this can be granted in the main application after the case is disposed also. This can be granted while the case is going on also. You have to specifically ask for it. And then residence orders. So if you are living together and you have been thrown out of your matrimonial home, or if say for example you don't feel safe there, you don't want to stay there, you can ask for residence orders where based on the facts and circumstances of the case, the judge can tell you that okay, either they can tell the respondent, either you get her a place which is of the equal status of where she was living before or where you are living currently, or you can give her a portion of your house and you are refrained from entering that portion, or you can just get out of that house altogether and she will be the only one living there. So residence orders can be passed under section 19. Read section 19 thoroughly. Monetary relief can be passed. So when I was talking about maintenance, for you and your child as an aggrieved person, you can ask for maintenance under monetary reliefs. If there are any damages that you have suffered because of domestic violence, if there's any medical issue that has cropped up, if there is any loss of income or anything else that you have suffered, you can ask for monetary relief here under section 20. Then custody orders, I just told you, you can ask for custody of your child. Compensation orders. Now, again, monetary relief is basically for maintenance and daily needs and making sure that, you are good to go. And your husband or the aggrieved person or the respondent has the duty to maintain you and to take care of you financially. Compensation you can ask for the damages that you have suffered, for the harm that has happened to you, for whatever however disturbed you are, you can ask for compensation for that under section 22. Then interim ex parte orders, I just explained to you, they can be asked for under section 23 of the act. Penalty, now the judge, the magistrate has the power to penalize or to punish the offender, the accused or the respondent under section 31 if, only if, the respondent has breached the protection order. So for example, the magistrate passed a protection order that you are not to enter the workplace of the woman, of the aggrieved person, and the respondent breaches that order and enters the workplace and starts harassing her. Then if the aggrieved person approaches the magistrate and tells the magistrate that this has happened, then based on the sole testimony of the aggrieved person, the magistrate can pass an order under section 31 that can punish the respondent with an imprisonment that extends up to 1 year with 20,000 rupees fine or both. And if as a protection officer you're not discharging your duty properly, you're not doing everything you're supposed to do, you're not making your domestic incident report, you're not taking cognizance, you're not helping out the aggrieved person, then you can be punished as a protection officer also. The judge, the magistrate can punish the protection officer under section 33 with an imprisonment again that extends up to that extends up to imprisonment for 1 year. So I think somebody is trying to access a PPT and you inadvertently or leaving those marks. Just make sure if it happens, just remove them, okay? Because they cause disturbance. Okay, now thank you. Now we come to the main topic, which is the ingredients that you have to take care of while you're drafting your complaint under section 12. We have some questions in the chat box that I'll be taking after completing this presentation. So you have to make sure that you understand the law. Okay, I can't stress that enough. For that, you need to read the entire BEAR Act, and DV Act is not very big. It's not huge or humongous. So you can, make sense of it after 3 readings, 4 readings, 5 readings. So you have to understand the law. So you're able to connect the dots and understand, okay, this means that means that. And then you understand the facts. And then once you've understood everything, you put the cause title in your draft. The cause title will be, the name of the court first, where you are approaching the court. So like in the sample draft, you must have seen that in the court of Chief Judicial Magistrate or in the court of Judicial Magistrate First Class, comma, District Courts, Gurgaon. And then below that, you write the case number. The case number will be whatever number will be assigned to you once the case has been filed. So in your draft, you leave that blank. In domestic violence cases, we write DV dash of, then you write the year. Right now we are in 2021. So you write the year 2021. Then you go on to the case title. The case title will be the person who's filing the case versus against whom the person has filed the case. So for example, L has filed the case against M. So it will be L versus M. Okay, that will be the case title. And then you write, okay, what is under what provision you are approaching the court. In this particular case, you're approaching the court under section 12 of Domestic Violence Act. So you'll write it, application under section 12 of Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. And then you go on to index. Index comes first. When you're filing, you'll realize that index should be printed, which means that it should be typed and printed. It should not be handwritten later. A lot of the times we do it, we create the table and then we add things with our hand later. We shouldn't do that. It's not acceptable when you're going for filing, especially in Gurgaon district courts, although there are different rules and regulations in different courts, but you have to be sure that you know those rules. And so index tells you just exactly what is where. So first there will be an application, so it gives you serial number, then particulars, then page numbers. So like we have table of contents, we have index. You write whatever is there in the file, which page number, what can be found, that is index. Then you go on to memo of parties. This is very important because memo of parties contains all the details of the parties, their name, son of, daughter of, wife of, their residence, their current address, full address. With sometimes we these days we also write mobile number and email address. So why is memo of parties important? Again, when you see the sample draft, you'll be able to understand just exactly how it looks like. It is very important because it's based on the memo of parties that the notice gets served. So whatever address you're mentioning in the memo of parties, that is the address that will be used for the court's communication to you or the opposite party. Okay, so memo of parties. And then we have form 2. So like I told you, in rule 6 form 2, there are certain things that have to be answered to the magistrate before we go on to actually explaining the facts of the case. So we put that right in front, right on top. The most important thing right on top. Now, the sequence can change. Of course, there are some courts where you can also file the form to right at the bottom. But the petition or the application will never be rejected for the wrong sequencing of that. If there are any issues with the draft, when it comes to technical errors, you will be informed and you can cure the defects. Okay, so don't worry about that. But we put form 2, like I would suggest, I personally put form 2 right on top because it's the most important thing, and you should put the most important thing right on top. So judge can just, sort of peruse it and understand, okay, yeah, this is a genuine case. And then you start with brief facts. Now, one thing you have to remember is that a lot of the times when the client comes to you, they will not understand or tell you the facts in a proper chronological order, but you have to write the facts in a chronological order. So right from the day they met to the day they got married, to the day the first incident of domestic violence happened, and so on and so forth. You have to put everything into perspective, and you also have to ensure in your draft that you are showing the magistrate that, see, this happened and this is economic abuse. See, this happened and this is sexual abuse. So on and so forth. So your facts have to be in a chronological order. Once you're done with the facts, you go on to cause of action paragraph. Cause of action paragraph tells you just exactly why you're approaching the court. So since there is no limitation in filing domestic violence complaints, you don't have to be worried about limitation, whether it is within limitation or not. You just have to write, and that those paragraphs have also been mentioned in your sample draft. You can go through them after today's session. So the cause of action has arisen every single time the domestic violence has been committed against the applicant or the complainant, and that the language and everything you can see from the sample draft, that paragraph has to be there. Then there has to be a paragraph saying there is no delay in filing this particular complaint or application, which is limitation paragraph. Then there is one paragraph where you have to mention if there is any pending litigation. So a lot of the times in domestic violence cases, there are multiple cases going on. there are sometimes maintenance cases under section 125 CRPC going on. Sometimes divorce cases going on. Sometimes there is a 498A case going on. Whatever case is going on, you have to mention if there is any pending litigation. If there is no pending litigation, you just say there is no pending litigation. And then after that, you have jurisdiction. So like I told you, jurisdiction is very important, and you have to show how the jurisdiction has been created, why the court has jurisdiction. You can say either applicant is residing here, working here, or the respondent is here, or the cause of action has arisen here. The jurisdiction paragraph has to be there. And then of course there is prayer, where you ask for those orders specifically, that we need protection order. It is most humbly, based on the facts and circumstances as detailed above, it is most humbly prayed that the following orders can be granted by the magistrate by this honorable court, and then you ask for those specific orders. Okay, that can also be found in the sample draft. Now, these are some ingredients that must be present in your draft. There are bumps in the road while drafting which are avoidable. So try it on your own today. The problem statement that has been given to you, you have to make sure that you're going through the instructions thoroughly. First of all, first, I've given you a complaint to the SHO, which is essentially a complaint under section 498A. Now, that is a very basic draft just to give you an idea of the facts. So that complaint was written by the complainant herself, that okay, this happened, and that's why I want you to take action. And she went to the police station. And this is based on a real case, the draft that I've given you, although I've changed names and I've changed certain details, so the confidentiality remains intact, but it's a real case. So pay attention to it. So the facts can be seen in that complaint to the SHO. You have to read the facts thoroughly. You have to understand the law properly. And then I've given you a sample draft where I have told you the sequence of these ingredients that we just talked about. How you, make sure that you are putting all of those things in your draft is up to you. And you have to draft based on the facts that are given to you. You have to draft today and submit by 7 p.m. to lawchakra@gmail.com. I'll write in the chat box. And the top 3 drafts that will be selected will be informed tomorrow by 9 a.m. who are the top 3 participants. They will get a chance to argue their applications tomorrow. So you'll also get a chance to witness and to understand how you're supposed to argue. You've drafted, your case has been admitted. What next? How to argue. So that is also something that we'll talk about tomorrow. The final and the next chapter will be tomorrow. And tomorrow we'll talk about what are the do's and don'ts of drafting DV complaints. So first you will try it on your own. And then we will talk about what could have been done better, what should have been avoided, and things like that. When we talk about domestic violence, you have to remember this particular thing. Okay, it's a quote, but I find it very fitting. It's not the bruises on the body that hurt. It is the wounds of the heart and the scars of the mind. So emotional abuse, verbal abuse, and how it stays with you, the trauma and everything else has to be taken into consideration while asking for relief in your draft. Now we'll talk about your questions. You can send them to us later also. You can discuss them after this. After we are done with the presentation, we are done with the presentation. Thank you so much for such a patient hearing, everybody. Now I will just take up the questions that I can see, and then maybe Gitika, you can help me out, okay?
There are 2 questions, I guess. Astha and Akshat. Rest all have been answered.
Okay. So Astha has asked, ma'am, recently the Honorable Gujarat High Court has issued notice in a PIL asking the court to strike down the proviso which erroneously presumes that marriage essentially translates to consensual sex. I feel this is a welcome step, and let's hope the proceedings are expedited. Yes, thank you so much for sharing that with all of us, Asta. That's a very important piece of information. And it's because of conversations like these, it's because of activism like these, and it's because our generation, in particular your generation, is so active and so concerned about the society and the state of affairs, and even more tolerant than any of our previous generations, that these changes and these evolutions are on the horizon. So I would urge all of you to keep having these conversations, keep discussing things that matter, and keep clarifying your doubts, and keep expanding your own mental horizons to accept and include everybody, and to understand that nobody deserves to be treated in a bad manner, or to be discriminated against, or to be disrespected for whatever reason. Just on account of being human, they deserve to be treated with respect, and we should always remember that. And if anybody is not following that, and especially when we talk about topics like rape, which we already know where our country stands, so when it comes to that, consent is essential. And yeah, we all know no means no. So whether you're married or not, whether you're single, whether you're in a relationship, whether you've done it before and you don't want to do it again, whether you're doing it and in the middle you don't feel like doing it, you're saying no, no means no. Okay. And it's great that this is being recognized. Akshat has said, in a case of divorce claimed on the grounds of cruelty, apart from divorce as a relief, does the wife, if she is the aggrieved party, has to go for the relief under Domestic Violence Act separately in other court? Now, this is also a very interesting question. A lot of the times depends on the facts and circumstances of the case. But when a divorce case is already going on the grounds of cruelty, the divorce case goes to the family court. And in family court, there are principal judges that you address to. And domestic violence complaints go to the magistrate, as we just discussed. So yes, they'll be in different courts, but they can be in different courtrooms within the same establishment. But yeah, the cases will run concurrently in different courts. And the woman doesn't have to. How you advise the woman, why you decide to file a complaint under Section 12 of Domestic Violence Act, it's a very, very complex topic, and I wouldn't want you to think too much about that right now, because we are focusing on drafting right now. So just to get our drafting skills in line properly, let's focus on that. Whether or not you go for this complaint, whether or not you do something else, that depends on your experience, the legal opinion, the facts of the case, and how you're counseling your client. Okay, and what relief you really want. Like I told you, that a lot of the times, from my professional experience, I'll tell you, a lot of the times I get clients where women just want to get rid of their partner. They just want to be done with the marriage, and they've suffered domestic violence for the longest time, but they have never really pressed charges, they've never really filed a complaint, but now it's enough is enough and they want a divorce, but they know that the husband will not let them go. So a lot of the times we use domestic violence complaints as a pressure tactic also. It depends on the strategy of the case that you have. So the husband knows that he doesn't stand a chance if this proceeds further. And that's why your draft is very important. If it's strongly worded, if it's really, really powerful when it comes to substance. And by strongly worded, I don't mean that you're using Shashi Tharoor kind of words. Use simple words, be concise, be very, very, sequential. Just follow a chronological order, be logical, be reasonable, be simple, be concise. So the judge, the magistrate is able to understand what you're trying to say. But strong in the sense that you have a lot of substance. You know that you have proof, you know that you have these incidents that have happened, and you have brought them into the notice of the magistrate, and now if the case goes forward, the husband stands no chance. So ultimately just settle the case outside and get it done with. A lot of the times clients want that. So it depends on the strategy. Another thing that you must remember, in district courts, especially in Gurgaon, in Delhi we do sometimes, but in Gurgaon we do not mention case laws in our first petition itself. So when we are filing our applications, they are pleadings. We don't mention case laws there in itself. In Delhi, sometimes we do if you want to make our case stronger, but in Gurgaon, specifically in district courts, we don't. We use the case laws at the time of arguments. So you don't really need to mention them in your draft per se. But it'll be helpful if you're reading some case laws and you know that this is the law, this was said by the judge in this particular case, the facts apply to my case. So you can make sure that you're using that phrase. And then later when it comes to arguments, you can say that in this judgment, it was held this, and that's already in your draft. And of course, I know, I hope you know that you can't travel beyond your pleadings, right? So if you've not mentioned a fact in your draft, you can't really introduce it at the later stage of your case. That's also a reason why your draft has to be very comprehensive. We have more questions. Shreya has asked, ma'am, you heard the statement by an MLA on rape. Yeah, there are those kinds of statements coming on a daily basis, almost on a daily basis, and it's disgusting. So yeah, can't really do anything. Everybody has right to free speech, right? Okay, Sarah said, I don't know anything about drafting. It's okay. You're not here to be marked or tested or anything. You're here because you want to learn. So just try it out, and this is the best place to try because there are no consequences if you make mistakes. In court, there are consequences. If your poorly drafted document goes to the court, there are consequences. But even then, I recently attended a seminar where they were felicitating Justice Seema Kohli. And she beautifully said that, don't be afraid of making mistakes. We all can make mistakes. We're allowed to make mistakes. And that's what appellate courts are there for, So don't worry. All the mistakes can be rectified. So Chitra has asked, is it for immediate relief? Yes. So the interim orders that you can ask for, they can be granted in the absence of the other party under Section 23 and relatively faster relief. So Anchita has asked, what's the deadline for submission of the draft? So just go through the problem statement very carefully. The deadline is by 7 p.m. today. And it's okay if you're not able to finish it for whatever reason. I would urge you to try it out because, like I said, I don't like spoon feeding. And if you try it on your own tomorrow, we'll be able to discuss the mistakes and you'll be able to self-correct. You'll be able to understand it better. But if for whatever reason you're not able to do it, that's also okay. Attend tomorrow's session, but then you won't be able to take part in the arguments part. So we'll be selecting top 3 drafts, and those people who drafted those top 3 drafts, they will be allowed to argue. And yes, the person who argues best will get a letter of recommendation from me. Okay. Any other questions, guys? You can just write no in the chat box if there are no other questions, or if anything else you would like to clarify. Okay, Sarah said no. Awesome. Wait. I had to show you the rules, right? And yes, guys, you should also know that National Commission of Women allows you to file online complaints as well. And then they take it forward to the magistrate also. So people should be aware of that. Thank you so much, Shrey. That's so kind of you. 1 second. I will share the link with all of you. Just spread it, amplify it, create awareness in, women around you. So here, wait. One second. I'll just share the link with you. Yeah, I'll share it on the WhatsApp group also. I'll share it here also. This is where you can register online complaints. And these are the rules with the forms and everything. 1 second, I'll share that. And also, guys, if you haven't yet, please follow Law Chakra on all social media channels. We'll be, giving updates, sharing updates on our social media channels also for our future sessions and everything else. Gitika will just share the link with you on the chat box. And we'll also share these links with you in the WhatsApp group. so you can follow us, just in case you don't get the mail, or I don't know if all of you have been added to the WhatsApp group, because we were facing a lot of technical issues. If you or your friends were not able to attend the session, or if they are not a part of the group, just let us know and follow us on all of these channels to get more updates. And any other questions, guys? Are you going to be there tomorrow? Will you be excited? Will you be as excited as you were today? Awesome. Great. I just hope that you felt like your morning was productive. Saturday morning was productive. Yes, Sapna, it will be uploaded on YouTube. I'll also stop recording now. You reminded me. I'll stop recording. Thank you.